All right, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started. So thank you for joining us this morning. We have a fantastic session for you. And we also have a full house. Like this is great to see everyone back out after the pandemic and people getting out and about and networking again. It's absolutely fantastic to see. So welcome. Today's session is on how AI is transforming our industry and sector, and certainly this is a very disruptive technology and area, but it's also one of huge opportunity. And I think just the level of attendance we've had here demonstrates the level of interest that all of us have in this area. So looking forward to the discussion this morning. I'd like to start off just by acknowledging that today we are standing on the land that is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. I also acknowledge that Ontario is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. I also want to say just briefly that there's been a lot of work done by ourselves as well as other organizations. I think of Biotalent Canada and their labor market report that has shown that as an industry, we've done quite poorly in engaging Indigenous populations in our industry and our sector. And so this is something that collectively we need to be aware of and a challenge that we need to tackle together. So with that said, it is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this session, Ann Woods, who is the Managing Director at RBCX for their Life Sciences and Healthcare. Ann is also one of our board members and has been just a great supporter of Life Science Ontario. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Ann to the podium.
I'm just going to take the mic from you and stay seated here so I can see everybody. So yeah, great turnout. Thanks, everybody. We were just chatting about how there seems to be a number of these AI events because it really is top of mind. But we've got, I think, a whole new crowd of people that maybe the panel hasn't seen before. So you'll get to hear their perspectives for a first time. So one of the things we wanted to do when we were sort of relaunching our knowledge and networking breakfast and trying to get a good crowd of people out is really tackle what's top of mind. And I think that for a number of years now, we hear AI, we hear machine learning. We now generative AI seems to be what most people are talking about. But how does that really impact everything from the bench and drug discovery all the way to how therapeutics companies are interacting with patients, how healthcare providers are interacting with patients, and I think that it's fitting along that drug discovery and patient journey at each step of the way. And so when we pulled together the panel, we wanted to make sure that we were able to touch that entire journey. And so we have, I think you probably read their bios, so I won't go through the long intro since I'm thinking we should save that time for questions rather than bios. But we really have the sort of full spectrum where we've got two investors that are really kind of in there seeing what the next great thing is going to be, and then Odaya, who's already out there working with therapeutics companies, and then Jen has expertise in marketing, and so she's getting a ton of questions about how what patients are asking, like, and I think the best line I heard from her was ChatGPT isn't peer reviewed, and I think that's important for people to remember. So I pulled together some questions that I shared with the group, and I'm going to dive in. I'm going to sort of take advantage of my mic and ask the questions that were top of mind for me. But what I will probably ask Brian to do is sort of when we're about, if I don't do it myself, when we're about maybe 20 minutes in, just give me the flag to take a break so I don't monopolize and give all of you a chance to ask questions, because I think, Helen and I were chatting about how it's, those questions are actually going to drive what folks like these actually, the work that they continue to do, because what may be top of mind for us right now is kind of clouding our judgment as to what needs to be top of mind for us tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to dive in, and I'll start with the investors first, because I feel like, there was a time in 2020 where, you just registered a .ai website, and then you went out with a slide deck and someone handed you $20 million. And I think that's changed, but I think it's changed that people are cutting those checks for no reason. But I think the technology has advanced over the last few years as well. And so I won't pick on Sanjana first, because I know she had to rush in at the last minute, stuck in good old Toronto traffic. But maybe I'll go to Bharat and ask him how have you seen things evolve over the last few years, and what's better today than it was a few years ago?
Yeah, thanks, Anne. Things have changed a lot. I think 3-4 years ago, like you said, AI, as long as someone plastered it, had this fancy person from Stanford, you could raise 10-15 million, and pharma was just throwing money at it. I think what's changed now is people understand that AI is a tool and nothing more than a tool. And there's also a finer understanding of where along the development path of a drug or of a med tech or whatever it is that AI can be used. And so now there's a lot more focus on, okay, you are an AI company, so what? What are you using it towards? And how is that aspect changing versus the standard approach, right? The pre-AI approach, if you will. And so for us as investors as well, we spend a lot of time saying and still seeing this company that comes and says, we have the best AI, we have the best AI. 3 years ago, if you had the best AI, whatever that meant, you were given money. Now no one comes out and says they have best AI if they want any credibility. It's, I have the best AI for this tool and this use case, and this is where the use case can be expanded on.
That's great. Sanjana?
Yeah, so I have a slightly different perspective. I work at a purely AI-focused fund called Radical Ventures, where we invest across the stack, foundation models, infrastructure layer, and then even the applied layer, which is where you have exposure to pharma, like bio AI or healthcare AI. So one, on a broad level, how has the technology changed? On the one hand, it's a very exciting time, right? Like AI, modern AI was developed here in Canada, just a few blocks away at U of T. Geoffrey Hinton, who is the Albert Einstein of AI, is based at U of T, Vector Institute. So it is very exciting to see that the Canadian government's investment when nobody was investing in AI has now come to fruition. The breakthrough in 2012 in neural networks happened at U of T, which has led us to this moment of transformers. Transformers is the T in ChatGPT. And again, another Canadian company founded by somebody called Aidan Gomez, who was the author of the Transformer paper. So these are all very exciting developments. ChatGPT has become ubiquitous. People are discussing it in the boardroom and then going home to their kids, and it's a conversation on the dining table. So there is a lot of excitement. So in my world, I see a lot of foundation model companies and infrastructure layer companies still raising ridiculous amounts of money. But what has changed is the applied layer. Any company that is exposed to an industry, an end sector in an industry, is getting all the questions that Bharat just noted. Just last night, I was working on a company that's coming in to present to our committee on Monday, which is using generative AI for de novo protein design. And what has changed is everyone is really excited about this company because it's the only company that has pharma and technical validation versus just Stanford PhDs or Harvard PhDs from various people's labs who are starting a company in the space. So and I think that's also because what happened in COVID was there was a healthcare, pharma, bio gold rush, and that correction has also impacted the applied layer as well.
I think that it's a great segue to Helen and thinking about applied uses of AI. And so when you think about the conversations you were having with, I suppose, prospects back in kind of 2018, 2019, who are now customers now. How have those conversations changed? Were they more skeptical and now they've seemed to buy in?
I think there's always, you know, it's that crossing the chasm. I don't know, I had to teach it this week to my students, that's why. So I'm thinking about those innovators. So you always have a few people in the organization who are always going to see the future, right, in their organizations. And we lucked out when we were looking at predicting future journeys. So that's what we were working on at the University of Toronto, was looking at how we can understand future journeys. So a patient journey, a citizen journey, a customer journey. So we were looking at how we can think about, if we look at all these past journeys, but then start getting real time and understanding processes. So not only just using machine learning, but also looking at process mining and what we have developed in our systems, and then adding that and then looking at a journey. When we were explaining that, it was a pilot. Like we didn't even pitch. Someone came up and said, I think someone's trying to do that. And I think you can do that. You guys are not just students. You're out of the university, you're IP transferred. And it was just, the timing was perfect. It was the fall of 2018. I was walking through Mars, and they're like, one of my colleagues, Peter Lewis, he said, look, you know, you're working on, you know, Helen, you can't leave the university. I'm like, I'm not, I'm a U of T startup now, right? I'm still teaching a little bit. I said, so I'm still here. And he said, he goes, what are you working on? I'm like, we're predicting future journeys of understanding, you know, and he goes, what data have you used? I go, we've done a patient one, but we've also done a customer, like Chicago data experiment. And he goes, I have a pharma client. I just came from the meeting last week, and there's someone there you have to meet. They're trying to do predictive analytics on customer journeys. You have to talk to them. And that person really is trying to experiment, right? They're trying to do something at Rotman. They're trying to do something at CS. Like they're going around. So you have these innovators. And I think many of you are in this, like, you know, in the morning, coming in the morning, congratulations. I am putting you guys in that innovator box of early morning, like keeners. It's getting there and saying, I want to innovate in my organization. So what do I do and who do I seek out? And that was 2018. Now, it took 6 to 7 months of auditing to even get data, you know, to even get into this pharmaceutical company, right? Like even to start the POC and get our data, but that gave us time to get ready for it. So I think a lot of time the use case, people see it, but you have to prep so much for that use case. It's like they don't understand that product development part, the engineering heavy part. Like it didn't even hit our algorithms until months later. So people expect a lot of fastness, and the reality is there's a lot of work. There's a lot of prep time that you have to get ready for these companies and for this data, and eventually the scaling happens, right? And then you perfect and you're working on it. But those innovators, those are the people I always tell startups to go after. Like if you're hearing someone and they're just like, it's AI, I don't know, whatever. And I'm like, you're not my market. We're good. I'll just go to someone else. Like, I don't need to talk to you. We're fine.
So I like that. So like everyone's giving me these great segues, because patient journey is kind of what I wanted to loop Jen in on. And so if you think about how the patient journey has changed with now, before I go and see the doctor, I'm not just asking Dr. Google, but I'm asking ChatGPT. When you're having conversations and consulting with your marketing hat on, how has your conversation changed 4 years ago to today?
Yeah, it's super different. I want to see a show of hands. I'm assuming everybody has heard of ChatGPT, but how many have used it or tried it?
Well, that's pretty good.
No, well, yeah, and well, that's a good question. If not, why? Anyone want to say? Does it just seem weird to try something new? Like, that's kind of the question. Anyway, so I come here not as an AI expert. I'm a marketing expert. So I'm more of a user. So I learned something I didn't know about the U of T connection. But in my conversations, I hear a lot about the missteps. So if we've heard of it, most of us, and tried it, that it's really powerful for, saving efficiencies. You can come up with copywriting titles and ideas, idea generation and such. But a quick story though on the pitfalls of it. So I had an intro call with someone. She has a healthcare platform, and it's supposed to be peer-reviewed research to targeting women menopausal issues. And she had a writer handling the writing, so it's supposed to be peer-reviewed. She had a physician come to her and say, hey, I found like a really problematic error on your website. Can I see the citation? And she thought, oh no. She goes to her copywriter. The guy used ChatGPT to write the whole thing, did not reference. And so I have a science background, a master's in nutrition. So I know that when I write copy, you go to the literature, get your own facts, right? You get your own sources and then write it. And sure, you can use ChatGPT to like massage the text and whatnot. So I think he still has his job. I don't know, but it was a lesson learned for that business owner because she relied on it, put it out there and write it, and it generated something inaccurate and factually inaccurate. So the conversation has changed in that ChatGPT is used by pretty much everyone I know at every company. Your writers are doing it. So I specialize in, website copywriting, but a lot of you might, work on or contribute to technical articles. So a couple lessons learned there is, well, like you kind of said that I had mentioned before, ChatGPT doesn't have a science degree. It pulls up information, it's not cited, and you have no idea because it uses such a large data set to get it's a generative AI language model. The data set is so large that it could come from anywhere and you have no idea where. It just takes the most likely probability of what has been published before and puts it out in an output. So that's just one thing I've seen from that perspective.
Yeah, but that sort of, has me thinking about the garbage in, garbage out conversation that often comes up. And so I think about so many pitch presentations that I see where you've got a platform that's gathering data, and then immediately there's a business plan to monetize that data. And so, I don't know, is that data worth monetizing? Does anybody want to pay for it? And so Radical Ventures is invested in an amazing company called Pocket Health. If you haven't already seen it at the hospital, good, because that means you haven't been in the hospital with a broken bone, but it's really a game changer. And I've got to think that that's, somewhere on their radar is we're building this massive library of images. But when you're thinking about, gathering data that's going to eventually be monetized, how are you sort of vetting how they're gathering that data, or what concerns you about the data that's being gathered?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that the most important thing for Radical overall, whenever we invest, we have this clause in our term sheets, which is on ethical AI guidelines or responsible AI guidelines, which no other firm has. In the beginning, we used to get questioned on it by every legal counsel of the company that we were investing in. So all of our companies have to have like a responsible AI framework, and that is extremely of utmost importance in the healthcare and the pharma space because there is absolutely zero margin for error. So one aspect of that is the data. And so I think, without going into technicalities, I think the most important part of validating data or the data asset being developed by these companies is representation.
That's amazing. So I come from the big pharma world, and so when I think about data sets that are built on data that's coming from big pharma, I think, I don't know if that's such a great idea. So Bharat, when you guys are talking to companies, how much time do you spend in your diligence process thinking about, what data set was their drug discovery AI built on?
Yeah, I mean, look, the original data is critical, right? There's no way of putting that. Let me answer that question in a sort of a bit of a tangential way, okay, for a couple of reasons. One, data is important. AI is important. What you use it for is important. The AI piece, it's all, to me at least, it's gobbledygook. I would not be able to understand what's going on there. What I can understand is the data piece and how to use it piece, right? And so we've been investing in the AI space since about 2018, and we've done 3 companies that I'll talk about. Deep Genomics, which I think everyone's familiar with here. I led that investment primarily because they had their own data sets that they had been built. They had their own AI, But where they were really trying to focus on is what the use case of that AI was, right? So where we came in and where we helped them build that out was to say, okay, you can't really question Brendan on AI. On data, you can talk to him, but we can help you build that out. A couple of other companies, there's a company that I invested in out of Boston called Celsius, which had one of the world's largest data sets of patient biopsies. And the reason we went in there was because these were patients, to Sanjana's point, collected with the right frameworks, with consent, all of that. Then you build AI tools upon that in order to predict and choose molecules or targets that you can then advance into the clinic. And that program is now in phase 1 clinical trial. And then the third company, this is a company that I was the founding CEO of. We licensed an extremely large data set from one of the largest CROs in the world. And the reason we did that was because we knew that within that data, there were programs that that company had taken into the clinic, right? So sort of you need to be able to say that this data has some value because it has direct impact on patients' lives. And once that happens, then you can use that to build AI tools. I think you're an AI person here, but building the AI tool now, my feeling is it's becoming a commodity, right? You can go to any shop and say, hey, can you build this AI for me? Can you build this tool for me? Because AI is nothing more than a program that does something. Yes, you can get to the complex generative stuff. That's different and that's difficult. But to build basic AI, that's easy. So if you have good data sets, you can go find anybody to build that and identify biology and try to drive that forward.
Yeah, I've often said AI is just a synonym for algorithm. It's really the generative AI that is, doing my thinking for me, I suppose. So Helen, when you think about the data sets that Odea, it's like, here's what we've got. Let's use this data. Is there anything you wish, it was like, oh, I wish this information was available for me?
About a few months ago, our wish was having more patient data, clinical trial data, because then it can say there's going to be a need for a therapeutic, there's going to be a ping. So it's going to kind of, usually our data would always come from RX, like any RX data, anything that would happen on the pharma side. So the data sets we would always get was pushed from when finally the doctor would give the prescription to the patient and the patient would go to the pharmacy, and that's the data we would get, the pharmacy data. We'd also start adding more data around who the doctor is, KOL data, like key opinion leaders. So we were adding more data that could kind of create a full picture. And creating full pictures without that patient data, you have the prescription and you kind of know the journey that they're going through and the multiple therapies they're on, and their disease journey. Getting patient data and clinical data that can then ping and say, this doctor will eventually need this therapy for their patient, like they'll need options, and we just finished a clinical trial. Not just finished a clinical trial, but it's ready to be launched. That kind of relationship, that pinging for us was really important. So we're now in that mode for 2024. So that question of like what I'd wish, well, it's happening, right? But it took that many like months and years to get to that point. But I think having the vision of a full, what your data journey as a company is, not now or 2 years now or 3 years now, but it's like, what would I need to get prepared for 4 or 5 years from now? So that is our vision, to eventually have a full understanding of journey. And then, then you can say, okay, we can really support so many therapy journeys. And that's what's exciting. That's kind of like, getting a full picture of what someone's going through and say, here's the therapy. The doctor makes their own opinion, and, but the options are there. The information is there. The knowledge is transferring. And yeah, it's really exciting when you get a data set, but I've always I have to track down data sets now for my students, and I'm still running around. I'm like, hey, do you have a data set? I'm still it's the fuel, right? It's the complete fuel. I think with the AI part and the algorithms, like for us, it's hard. It is not easy for us. It is not easy at all. When you're doing complex and you have thousands and thousands of doctors and then thousands of like a therapy, and then you have information that's moving continuously, and it has to be real time, and you have to make sure territories and things are moving and personas are changing, and there's so much stuff happening, and there's information flowing. The development of, our team would not think it's easy at all. Oh my gosh. I think they're like always crying. I bring extra napkins when I go places just in case they need it, you know.
Are there therapeutic areas that are harder than others? I intuitively, I want to think that like rare disease would be harder than cardiovascular.
Rare disease a lot more, because then your patient level, like the amount of patient level data is less. So rare disease, I think we stick to, we have about 15 therapeutics, 15 areas of therapies. So from oncology to dermatology, and those 15 areas, I would say rare disease is the hardest.
Yeah, that's
for anyone, for like, you know, because of the patient level, getting that into like getting the amount of data, you know, it is hard. So oncology, dermatology, there's a lot of data in there. Yeah.
So Jen, in your journeys with ChatGPT, have you kind of drilled down to the sort of therapeutic level and got any insights? It's like, okay, I'm okay asking it questions about dermatology, but I'm not going to let it provide me advice on heart disease.
It's the outputs are very general, I've seen, and I've seen information that was flat out wrong. It generates wrong. So I haven't really played with it too much in that regard, but that's sort of why I asked the question earlier if anyone has used it, because in your practices, so aside from the business launch side and data generation and stuff like that, I encourage everybody to try using it, because everyone in your junior team, it's almost like when social media came to be, right? It was really new and kind of odd and scary, but I encourage everybody to try using it and practice with it. It's like a free app basically, but you can learn how it comes up with what it comes up with, its outputs, and learn how to integrate it into your businesses. So yeah, I always come from the marketing copywriting side of things, but you can use it for much more mundane tasks, like if you have to input a bunch of contacts into your CRM or something, you can say, hey, can you please upload these email addresses and put their name and company into a format I can paste into Excel. So this is where the practical side of it, it's way, more run of the mill. It's not complicated and it's not really about the science. But that's just one thought that came to mind. Yeah.
For us, I just was going to say we're always experimenting. So right away we started experimenting in our company, but we had to, take the time to make sure we weren't putting any client data on. So for ChatGPT, so we had to work on our own LLMs. Creating a closed environment of data will then eventually help you on that, right? Creating your own data set within your own LLM. It's not public, it's audited. That's kind of our vision, and that's what we're experimenting with, right? So experimentation happened right away. Like I think there was right when it was launched, 7 months ago or 8 months ago, we all jumped on it. We're all doing stuff. We were all I just created a story. They created a whole story about me riding a unicorn. I was like, really? This is the first thing you guys work at this company? It's not maybe a patient message or something, or maybe an email or something. No. This is the first. Helen on a unicorn with glitter. I was like, this is great. This is fantastic. And that was my chief product officer. You would think it was some intern. No. This is leadership level. But we then stopped. We didn't put any client data, of course. That was just we don't put that anywhere. We were always thinking about our gardens and our walls, and we're just closing stuff up. The experimentation where it'll become creative and more trustworthy, I think that's the word. Because what I'm hearing from you is the lack of trust. Mm-hmm. That's the thing. And the transparency of the data, the transparency and the trust of it, that was where it started getting interesting, because we're seeing a lot of LLMs used where a sales rep or a medical rep can talk to and say, hey, where should I go now and why, right? The why, right? You need data. You got to see the data, right? That's what we do. We say, why should you go there? We're not just telling you to go, because we don't like that. I don't like people telling me what to do. So I kind of transferred into the product. Why should I go? Why should I do that? And that's where the machine learning helps, right? To say, well, why? Let me tell you. Let me tell you about the doctor, why you shouldn't go. That's the number one thing, is don't go bother them. Stop knocking on the door with your Krispy Kremes. You know, maybe next week, right? So I think it's the why is the part that is, the data is fascinating, and why the machine learning can tell you, right? Why this person's important to your journey as a medical rep, or why this is important to the patient journey. Now, as a marketer, why should you launch that campaign at that time? You know, having those conversations and then get creative around those campaigns. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, totally. And one thing with the ChatGPT in particular is the tone of voice aspect. So it can really, so if you're writing something, I specialize in LinkedIn a lot for a lot of my clients, and I'm on there myself. So that's one area where you can write a series of posts, because we all have to get our thought leadership out there. It can learn your tone of voice. If you say, well, okay, I want to write this, can you write 5 versions, but put it in a positive yet professional tone of voice with a quirky angle? Like, you could be that specific. But yeah, for campaigns, that's the perfect thing to bring up, because you can try something, see if it works with your audience, like in real time, even outside of AI, and then go back with your data and say, okay, people didn't really like this aspect, if you do surveys or whatever, and you can try it again and come up with similar messages that tweak just the right part you want to tweak that didn't resonate. So yeah, in the campaign sense, it's such a great tool. And I want to add too, it's not just ChatGPT. Every tool I use, social media schedulers, content like a CRM, like HubSpot and stuff like that, those platforms, they all are starting to have their own built-in AI assistant. Sometimes it'll be called your little helper or AI magic or whatever, but in Canva as well, it's not just the writing, it's also design. So we will see these tools, again, I come from the practical hands-on use side. We will see them in almost, it's probably in our Outlook right now for all I know. So it's really good to learn how to use them, leverage them, be ahead of the curve, because like I said, it will, and it is taking over the workforce at all levels, in all areas. So it's just something else to keep in mind.
I'm going to go to the audience. I'm going to go to the audience for questions, but Sanjana, you look like you wanted to jump in on something, so I'm going to let you jump in on it first.
Yeah, I mean, to this conversation, I do think that there are just so many applications. ChatGPT is not the right person to go to for your medical questions. UHN is right here, is developing, Bo Wang, who's the chief AI officer or chief AI scientist of UHN now, is developing like large language models for you, trained on, fine-tuned on medical data. So they know how to have a conversation about medical questions. And this is now happening in every hospital. There's thousands of startups that have access to this unique data that are fine-tuning a large language model with the right data so that you can have the right type of conversation. You have a company built by a team out of Montreal, Google DeepMind team, that is actually working on using not just large language models, but other sets of models and other methods like reinforcement learning, human feedback, to help pharma teams use these same models with knowledge work. So it's like, instead of the thousands of analysts that are spending way too much time on collecting the right type of data, then thinking about it, putting it into tables, they're enabling that. Again, this is not replacing workforces, it's just making people more productive. I mean, I love using these tools. They're not all ready to be used. Actually, some of them are terrible at this moment because, again, not all the best AI companies are going to be built the year, ChatGPT became mainstream. So there's just so many interesting applications. There's the language models. There's also diffusion models. How are people designing new antibodies to target undruggable parts of cells? It obviously has to be validated in the wet lab, but the first part is being made easier because of language models plus diffusion models. So I think there's a lot of folks, there's a lot of teams that combine not just AI expertise, but also clinical expertise, pharma expertise, commercial expertise in healthcare, that are being really thoughtful about the tools that are being built that will augment all of us, not now, maybe 5 years, and 10 years down the line, hopefully it becomes mainstream.
Allison's going to take the first question.
Question about data, because we've been So we sound pretty positive about data, so I want to push back a little bit about where we are with data. Because even in clinical trials, especially phase 1, we already know there's a bias as to what populations will go into a phase 1 trial, and then you're building algorithms. So we're saying we've got data, so we're getting better. The imaging is a little different example because they're using self-data coming from a hospital. But even in Ontario and Toronto, it's diverse. But there are populations in even Ontario, Toronto, that don't go to the hospital when they're sick. And so, same with patient journeys, et cetera. So, you know, I'm in the omics field, so a lot of some of these early AI tools and drug discovery tools were built on things like the UK Biobank, which is a great biobank, but clearly not diverse. So can you speak a little bit, and there's implicit bias by the people who use it, and the problem with ChatGPT is it reinforces implicit bias because it's, so can you talk a little bit more about how you're evaluating whether it is, so even though if it's getting into a clinical trial, it can still be biased because the clinical trial is also going to reinforce that bias until it gets to later on where you're saying this is for everybody and we have to make sure the trial covers everybody it's going to be designed for. So what's a concern in some of the pharma industry is that we're designing for certain populations and the other populations will never get a design. So can you speak a little bit more about the underlying data, how you're looking at those companies, or if the valuation is there's a big enough target, that's okay. So just a question about that, because I'm not sure we're there with it yet.
I'm going to throw that to Bharat, just because that drug discovery piece is very much in Amplitude's wheelhouse.
Well, I think what you've said there is sort of the fulcrum of this entire conversation, right? AI is not one thing, it's multiple things, and it's where it can be used. It can be used for drug discovery, it can be used for clinical trials, it can be used for designing novel things, and it could be used for marketing. So it really depends on where the use case is. I agree with you entirely. AI tools for clinical trial design are just not there. Are they being used? Absolutely, and they should be because it helps speed up the process to some extent, but it's still not good enough. For me, I'm a therapeutics investor, that's all I do. So for us, you're looking at AI and data sets at the molecular level, where yes, there will be differences, but when you're looking at large enough data sets, those differences are less and less. And when you're taking them into preclinical testing, it's not really that meaningful in terms of is there a difference between the ethnicity of the person or not. That comes after. And so for us, it's a matter of saying, okay, can you use large enough data sets? Can you collect samples from broad enough groups? And that's something that we use at the ground zero in order to get those samples, in order to drive that forward. Having said all of that, it really depends on where you want to be in that use case spectrum, where that becomes an issue. So for us, again, it's not as much of a concern because we're looking at true genetics and DNA and whether there's being something amplified or not.
No, go ahead. Go. But most of the genomics work is biased, right? And we have examples of like multiple genotypes across ethnicities. So actually ethnicity is very important in a genomic or a proteomic data bank. So it could really, it still gets drug discovery, but it still could mean that there is a swath of population that is not involved at the molecular, because that's the place I play into at the molecular level. So that's where the concern's been around, you know, like I say, some of those biobanks, they're getting better, but like even 23andMe, which a lot of people have been using as an underpinning thing, they'll stand up and tell you that they are targeting certain populations because of the problem of not having enough genetic information from those ethnicities to drive drug discovery.
Absolutely. And so to give you a more direct example, right, the company that I mentioned, Celsius, that's using single-cell genomics. A lot of groups who use single-cell genomics by saying, let's go to the UK Biobank, right? It exists, it's really good, let's use that. One of the things that we wanted to do with this company when we started is saying, okay, that's one set, but we need to go look at other data sets from other universities because you have to still take patient samples. There's already an implicit bias in terms of who agrees, who doesn't, and all of that. And that's not a problem that can be fixed before you start to get the data set. Sometimes you need to build that and fix that as you grow about. So what we did there was say, okay, let's take it from the UK, let's take it from U of T, let's take it from a bunch of hospitals there. Let's collect all of that data set and look at the molecular level across all of the spectrums, because what you're looking for, at least in the molecular level, is correlation and not causation. And yes, in certain genetic populations, there might be direct causes or not. we will try to figure that out as we do the biological work. But when you're looking for correlation, it's important, but it's not as critical. So let's try to do that work and then figure it out as we go. It's still a problem, absolutely, and something we need to fix.
One quick point over there. I think you raise an absolutely valid point. Unfortunately, I think this is a systemic problem. So what can we do from our end when we're investing? We, for example, have invested in a menopause management and healthy aging company that's leveraging algorithms for hot flash detection prediction. But most importantly, it's surfacing data on a population that was invisible. So it's creating visible data for a totally invisible population. And so I think, what can we do? Help some of these companies, fund some of these companies. It's really sad to say, but out of all the companies I work with, the amount of times we have to bang our heads against the wall, just getting people, it blows my mind that people don't understand this problem. And the amazing work that this company is doing from even a data collection or data generation perspective. But it's on all of us. Like if a company like that or many other companies like that are doing this important work, go knock on pharma's doors, folks in the room who understand this, for whom this is an actual problem. Like most women in this room, we're consuming drugs that were not actually built for us. So if we can take a step in helping these companies succeed, of course, after our own independent evaluations, and fund them, open up doors for them, help them in whatever way in pushing this research forward. I think that's the most important thing we can do right now.
I'm not going to burst out in applause, but.
So fantastic panel. I'm actually going to cheat and ask 2 questions, but the first one's a quickie. As you said, Anne, there's been a lot of conversations around AI recently, and I attended one that was a discussion with Dr. Ben Goertzel, who's one of the founders of Singularity Net. Really, really interesting talk. But he agrees with Ray Kurzweil's prediction that AI will essentially outpace humans' ability to think by 2029, give or take a couple of years. So is that hype, or do you agree with that prediction? So that's my first question. The second one is lots of discussion around AI replacing, professionals and people in many respects. Through the lens of life sciences, what do you think are the areas that are most at risk at AI essentially replacing people, and those that are more insulated from AI as it progresses? So those are my 2 questions.
How much time do we have? Okay, so maybe I'll do the first one, sort of, like the 2029 was the, yeah, is it?
I remember seeing a talk that's what kind of fueled my, it was in 2012 when I saw Fuel from Ray, and he had a very expensive painting behind him. And I was like, wow, it's really, who is this guy? And I think sometimes will it outpace? I think some days it outpaces me every day, right? I'm just like, wow, I'm not awake yet. So I feel like there's some things I think it has outpaced. Like it totally has gone forward, of course. Like I can't self-drive a car. I can't even drive a car properly, right? So it's done that many times. So the question is its level of ability and level of that person. So we're at different levels. Like I don't see it as this. Is it scary? Yes, on its usage, but many things are scary when you use things. I don't know. It's weird saying outpacing. I think that's the thing. I don't know what that means. You know what I mean? And I think that's kind of can I get more superpowers? That's all I ask. Like that's all I think about all day. I don't care about the menial jobs. I don't care about that. I really don't care about the easy jobs you can do for me. I just don't think about that level anymore. Can you do that for me? Congratulations, like Siri can do it, right? That's great. I think about the superpowers I can get, like how I can propel people forward by 20, 30 years. That's not what I do at a job. Like I support people that took something that took them 20 hours a month. Now it takes them down to 30 to 40 minutes. So that medical rep, sales rep is taking, you know, it's a use case I have to do at a business level. When I'm hearing some amazing talks and some amazing people are working on radiology, you know, people, I think the statement is a radiologist who uses AI is going to be a pretty awesome radiologist versus a radiologist who does not use AI, right? It's that kind of, can you go faster and be more superhuman and support that patient and get my diagnosis faster to me? That's all I care about. I care about I want to know if I'm sick now. Don't tell me 6 months from now. Don't tell me a year from now. Don't tell me in 2029. I want to know now, and I want to know what therapies I'm going to get, and I want to get healthy. That's it, right? And I think that is what propels me in life, is how faster can I get to save more people and include more people? That's all I care about too. So the inclusion is not only everyone in this room who we have access to things, and even when we don't have access, we're excluded. We don't have the data about ourselves. We're trying to find applications. You're hearing people who don't have access. So I think about inequality of access to care, and then I think about, can I give access? So I think about superpowers. Can you give me superpowers tomorrow? Just a question about that.
Maybe I'll take your second question and just say, so like we often talk about radiologists being disrupted by AI. I feel like that's the one that comes up, but what maybe for each of you, what's the one sort of role in life sciences that's a job today that might not be a job tomorrow, or certainly will be really disrupted by AI?
I've been replaced by ChatGPT.
Okay.
No, again, I'll let the experts speak on the science side, but the roles like copywriting, I've hired interns to help me in my business before, and I know, and it's sad to say, they will never get a job. Companies are not hiring, you know, for advertising writing, copywriting. They're bringing it under, you know, 1 or 2 people, and then they're using AI tools to amplify that. So that's 100%, and that's why I've positioned myself more as a fractional marketing director, because if you're focused on the knowledge work and the strategy, and that's true for other roles too, like in sales, business development, those roles are getting replaced. I've seen it, it's happened to me, and I've seen, they'll say, okay, we're bringing our copywriting in-house with an intern, and the intern's using the AI tools. So that's just from my low-level perspective.
Sanjana, why don't you answer? I'll take both questions.
Okay. Throwing you under the bus. I mean, look, will AI replace something? I don't think so. What AI will do is enable massive parallelization and therefore increase productivity. That's one thing I truly believe in. And there are examples of that happening across the space, right? In the lab, before someone could use 96 wall plates, now they can do 384 wall plates, but someone can only do one 384 wall plate at a time. So you use robotics to do multiple 384 wall plates at a time, right? So it's never going to replace something. It's going to parallelize it and help discover new things, hopefully. Same thing in the radiology space. I don't know what the proportion is. I'm going to throw a number out there, but let's say 80% of all x-rays are standard. Here's a broken bone. You don't need a radiologist charging whatever they charge in order to do that. But there might be the 10% or 20% where you need some dedicated more time towards that. So if you can parallelize those where the low-hanging fruit is taken care of and the higher, more complicated stuff can be used for AI, can be used for the doctor's time, let's use it there. So I think that's what AI is going to do.
Mark, we have a question in the back there.
Yeah, thanks so much. Mark Smithies, a great panel this morning. Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as co-chair of the Life Sciences Ideas to Action Policy Forum next week, that there's a lot of AI being discussed. There's an awesome panel there as well. So I encourage all of you to sign up and attend on Thursday. I want to take us in a slightly different direction and talk about risk. And this is probably a question for Sanjana, but maybe Bharat and the others as well. We're in a space that's moving at such a rapid pace. Bharat, you're more into therapeutics, so you've got some protection with patents and so on. How are you protecting yourself, Sanjana, from the risk of your company's being eclipsed because of the pace of change, because of the pace of the technology? A company that you love today may be eclipsed tomorrow?
Yeah, great question. We're always thinking about that, and that's like the primary question in our investment committee. And so I think we really skew heavily towards technically differentiated teams that are creating really strong moats, and those moats come from proprietary data access, IP portfolios that are being built, and like a unique combination of knowledge that those companies have to move forward. Now, to be more specific, an example I can give you is we have one company called Unlearn, which is creating digital twins of the control arm of clinical trials. And the founder, it's interesting, they've almost created a regulatory moat in that they have gotten European medical associations, agencies, approval for their method. And so this has unlocked massive commercial contracts for them. Now they're the only company that has that approval right now because they were forerunners. And, you know, in the realm of regulation, it's interesting because Charles always says that in AI for medicine or AI for healthcare, AI for pharma, you are guilty until proven innocent. And so he's used regulations to his advantage. So that's a type of moat. One of our companies that is building like a cry interpreter that's using machine learning on babies' cries to detect health conditions. It's a Montreal-based team. They've collected a unique data asset of clinically annotated cry sounds from multiple hospitals globally. Again, that's their moat because nobody else has done the very difficult work of collecting that data early on. But it's always a major question. But as a team, sometimes it's really frustrating for some of us who really are like, okay, we need to back this company because they're like moving so quickly commercially, let's get it. And the ethos is, no, I mean, the technical moat is the most important thing for exactly the reason that you point out.
Anyone else want to add to that, or should we, why don't we go to the next question? That was a great answer, so we'll.
Thanks, really great discussion. I was just gonna make a quick point that like CT didn't replace radiologists, right? They just moved from looking at film to looking at CT. So I think much the way for AI. I was just wondering if there's any room for innovation in kind of in the business models around collecting data, right? So you're talking about, you know, companies building up big moats of proprietary data. That's great, but then that sort of almost forces people towards more, you know, exclusionary, maybe not really having a good representative data set. So, you know, and there are technologies that help us to track things, right? Blockchain helps you to track multiple different things. So, you know, could you think about a future in which, you know, let's say patient data is sort of, patients have control over their own data and they can say, you know, who it goes to, or pathologists that are giving annotations towards, you know, training AI models. They have an element of ownership within that model so that if money gets made off of it, they can get paid back. I was wondering if that's an idea.
I hope so.
I mean, so we had a company out of Montreal, a company called Imagia, and their entire premise was similar to what you talked about, right? The patients have the rights to their data sets. It's still managed from the hospitals. So let's go try to get hospitals involved, and let's try to do partnerships with hospitals. It just took so much money and so much time to try to get hospitals involved that the company did one pivot where they said, okay, you know what, this is never going to work. We're spending too much time. So let's go merge with another company out of Vancouver that had a oncology test, because they thought, okay, here's an oncology test that the patients were doing. Let's give it to the patients, let them have a decision in terms of what happens or not. That test was used, was applied, was all of that, but it was still the doctor that had to prescribe the test. And the doctors were like, yeah, no, it's not important. Go do this other test instead. So it's really hard for the patient to have a say in that for whatever reason that is. And there's a multitude of reasons we don't have time to go into. So it's still the hospital that's a deciding factor. And companies that are trying to break that space either need $1 billion in the bank or they need something else to do, which is why like UHN's chief AI officer, I haven't chatted with him yet, but what I'm really hoping is if hospitals, they have not a lot of money, but they have some money, if they can start trying to scale up something to that effect and creating these entities within the hospitals and then spin them out, maybe that'll change things, but I'm not optimistic about that in the next 3 to 5 years.
So we're at time. So I'm going to hand it to Jason to wrap us up, but you know, hopefully the panelists can hang around for a little bit. So if you do have some questions, please feel free to grab them before they head out. And then we're all going to hang around here until 10 o'clock, I think.
Yep. Well, let's just say thank you to our panelists and amazing moderator. And Jen, I was chuckling myself as you were talking about the company with the baby cries, because I'm pretty sure that was a Simpsons episode. They've covered everything in The Simpsons. So a few announcements, as Mark shamelessly plugged. We do have well done, Mark, by the way. We have our policy forum next week. If you haven't signed up for this, I really encourage you to. AI is going to be a big topic because the overarching theme of our session is around disruptions and opportunities in life sciences, and certainly we are living in a very transformative time of our industry right now. And so this is a great opportunity to meet with leaders from government, from industry, from academia, to talk about, you know, what are the issues, challenges facing our industry and sector, what are the opportunities, and how do we capture them. So we have a great lineup of speakers and a great lineup of topics. Our largest event of the year is our awards gala, and that's coming up in May. Now, why am I telling you about this now? Because it's in May? Because we solicit from all of you nominations for our awards, and the due date for that is coming up on November 6th. So I would encourage you to go take a look. If you have companies, individuals that you think are exceptional within our industry, please nominate those individuals. We are always looking for diverse individuals as well. And we have several categories: Company of the Year, we have a Lifetime Award recipient, we have community service as well as volunteer. Our breakfast series will continue, and our next event is on November 16th. This is our member marathon. We host 2 of these per year. It's an opportunity to introduce new members to LSO, to our community. And we have Dicentra, McKesson, Novavax, and Company Ford, TBD. And finally, I just want to say thank you to all of our corporate sponsors. We really couldn't host events like this without the support, ongoing support of our corporate sponsors. So our platinum sponsors shown here, our gold sponsors, as well as our silver sponsors. And of course, I want to say a special thanks to RBCX for sponsoring today's session and for doing an amazing job at hosting and helping us organize the session. And thank you also to our hosts here at Marsh, providing the venue for us as well. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a fantastic day.